Sairam students, today we will continue with this chapter Educating Mother, written by Suganti Krishnamachari. Chapter number 7 from New Voices textbook. I am sure students, you all are ready with a pen and a notebook to write all the important points that we are going to learn. Now, before we continue with this chapter, let us quickly revise whatever we have learned earlier. In our earlier session, we understood that the mother is the narrator here. She tries to entertain the children by telling different stories like Goldilocks and Three Bears, Red Riding Hood. She also tries to narrate the story of Cinderella, but she was interrupted by the children with their logically correct questions. Then she again tried to tell the story about Jack and the Beanstalk and also about Patala Bhairavi, but the children were quick to reason the sensible logic behind these stories. They questioned the norms and had come up with their own version of the stories. One day, grandmother asked her daughter to tell the stories to the children. There were 4 children listening to the story. They were Venku, Ambu, Ramu and Janaki. Now, she cleared her throat and started. Long, long ago. As soon as she said long, long ago, Venku, her 3-year-old nephew, squeaked and asked, how long ago? Narrator tries to ignore his question and said, never mind, it was long time ago. Let's go on with the story. The narrator was interrupted again and again by these children while she was telling the story. Though mother was fed up with their question, but she still continued narrating the story about Goldilocks and 3 bears. She said, Goldilocks came to the cottage which belonged to the 3 bears. She was so hungry that she had a sip from Father Bear's cup and Mother Bear's cup, but she did not find it comfortable. When she finally tried Baby Bear's cup of porridge, she found it perfect. So she drank the porridge. Now, Ambu was fond of thrillers and romance story. She genuinely feels that why someone will just unnecessarily keep the bowl of porridge. She feels that it is definitely a murder mystery. She describes the Goldilocks in her own way. She said that Goldilocks might be a heiress and the house in the forest belonged to the person who stood inherent to the property if she died. That means that there is someone who wants Goldilocks to die so that that person can capture her property after her death. Now, when that particular person saw Goldilocks walking into the forest, he must have kept a bowl of poisoned porridge in the cottage. She must have drank the poisoned porridge and died. Now, Ambu felt that the bears might be her mother's creation as she does not accept on murder stories. Yes, students, this is where we stopped earlier. Now, let's continue with this chapter and read ahead. The little ones were drinking in her words with awe. Clearly, her version excited them more than mine did. Maybe Goldilocks was not the right choice. I would tell them some other story. Now here, students, awe means wonder. Now here, mother understood that narrating the Goldilocks story was not the right choice, and all the others were interested in Ambu's modified murder mystery story. And she was logically correct also. No one will unnecessarily keep the porridge ready on the table, right? So, she finally decided to tell them some other story. Now let's read further. I began the story of Red Riding Hood. Red Riding Hood took a basket full of cakes and went off to visit her grandmother, who lived all alone in the forest. Humans shouldn't encroach on forest land, said the environmentally conscious Janki. Now, students, here encroach means trespass. Finally, mother understood that these children are not satisfied with Goldilocks and Three Bears story. So she decided to change the story and she started narrating Red Riding Hood. She said, Red Riding Hood took a basket full of cakes and went to visit her grandmother, who lived in the forest. Now here, Janki was very eco-conscious girl. Now this time, Janki interrupted and said, human should not interrupt in forest land, as this might disturb animals and nature, right? Now, let's read further and understand what happened while mother was narrating Red Riding Hood's story. On the way, Red Riding Hood met a wolf and told it where she was going. The wolf took a shortcut to her grandmother's house and frightened off the old lady. The wolf then dressed in grandma's clothes. Presently, Red Riding Hood arrived. She looked at the wolf and said, Grandma, why are your ears so big? Ambu snorted. If one of us had mistaken a wolf for grandma, we have been eaten by grandma, even if the wolf had spared us. Now students, here snorted means made an loud grunting noise by forcing air through the nose. Now here, helpless mother. She again ignored Janki's question and continued with the story. She said, Red Riding Hood met a wolf and told it that she was going to meet her grandmother who lived in the forest. The wolf got a cunning idea and it took shortcut towards grandmother's house and ate Granny up. He got into Granny's bed. A little later, when Red Riding Hood reached the house, she looked at the wolf and asked, Why are your ears so big? Now, listening to this, Ambu snorted and said, If by chance any one of us had mistaken a wolf as grandma, then we would have been eaten by her. Ambu said, Even if wolf would have spared us, we won't be spared by grandma. Right? Now students, let us read ahead and understand further. Even the youngest was shaking his head in disbelief. Grandmas don't look like wolves, do they? He asked. My mother was watching me carefully. I could sense an air of hostility gathering against me. Now students, here air of hostility means feeling of unfriendliness. Now here the youngest, that is Venku, who was just 3 years old, innocently nodded his head and said, Grandma don't look like wolves. After listening to him, mother felt helpless as she was not able to entertain these children by her stories. she felt that she was losing the interest of her audience. Now students, let's read further and understand what mother replied to this. Of course, grandmothers don't look like wolves. Forget Red Riding Hood. I'll tell you the story of Cinderella. Oh mother, not that simpering idiot who waited all her life for Prince Charming to save her. She could have escaped her stepmother by getting herself a good education and a job, said Ambu. How could she have gone to school when she was made to do all the housework by her stepmother? Now students, here simpering means to smile in an annoying manner. Then idiot means a stupid person. Now here mother accepted that grandmas don't look like wolves. She tried to divert everybody's mind by narrating them Cinderella's story. As soon as she started with the story, Ambu denied to continue with Cinderella's story as she feels that Cinderella was a stupid person who waited all her life for Prince Charming. Ambu felt that she could have easily escaped her stepmother by getting herself a good education and a job. For this, mother replied, how could she go to school when she was made to do all the household work by her stepmother? Now, let's read further and see what Ambu replied. She could have gone to night school. Anyway, mother, why are all the dark person in your stories, girl? Who wrote these stories with a gender bias? Ambu asked indignantly. Now students, here dark means silly or stupid. Then gender bias means being partial to someone because of their gender. Then indignantly means angrily. Now, when mother asked Ambu how could she go to school as Cinderella was working whole day? For this, Ambu intelligently and actively replied that she could have gone to night school. Ambu continued asking as she wanted to know why are all girls only in the story and all appearing in a silly and stupid manner? Ambu was very angry and she also wanted to find out the person's name who had written such gender bias story. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Now let's read further. It was difficult enough trying to keep 3 children out of mischief by telling them stories. It did not help if one had to be politically correct too. I had to think of a story where the protagonist was male and preferably daft. What about Jack and the Beanstalk? I have heard that one, said Ramu. That's the one where the Jack plants a seed and a very tall plant grows from it overnight. Did Jack use a genetically modified seed? Asked Janki. It was no use. I had to think of something else. What about the old story of Patala Bhairavi, where a man wears magic slippers that take him wherever he wants to go? How were those slippers propelled? Asked Venku. What kind of fuel did he use? Asked Ramu. I fled. Now students, here the word protagonist means the main character in a story. Then the word propelled means move something with a lot of force. Now here the narrator again switches to the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, as it was difficult to control these children and it was also difficult to answer their logical questions, and this time she wanted to narrate a story where a boy is involved. As soon as mother started with the Jack and the Beanstalk story, Ramu interrupted by saying he had heard this story. It's where Jack plants a seed and a very tall plant grows from it overnight. For this, Janki asked an intelligent question that did Jack use a genetically modified seed? Now, for this mother again, she was helpless as she could not answer them. So she finally asked if she can narrate Patala Bhairavi story. Now, for this, Venku interrupted and said it is a story where a man wears a magical slippers that takes him wherever he wants to go. And now Ramu wanted to know how could those slippers move forward? What kind of fuel did he use? Now this time mother was extremely exhausted with their never-ending questions. So she flees, that is, she ran away with the very first question they raised. Now student, it's time to do reference to the context. Now here we are going to refer these lines. The name parents come up with, muttered Ambu. Thank God, you did not choose to call me Long Nose or Saucer Eyes. Now, the first question is, who was Ambu? Ambu was a 12-year-old girl. She was the narrator's daughter. Now, the next question is, which name was she referring to? Ambu is referring to Goldilocks. Then the next question is, what does Ambu's reaction tell us about her personality? Ambu's reaction tells us that she had an independent and curious mind. Alright students, as you all know, at the end of the lesson, we all understand the value point of the chapter, which so far I was doing for all the lessons and the poem. And now, this time, it's your work to do the value point of this chapter as a practice. Alright students, Saira.